Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. I'm back in the office, so we are starting our weekend with watches, and everything is for sale. SKUs, prices, and watch names in the description below. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for additional pricing questions, availability inquiries. We can even send you extra photos. We are always looking to buy, trade, and sell, which means building inventory. Sell me a watch or trade me a watch. We pay cash, we pay fast. No upper limit on value paid. We will buy your whole collection of Platinum Patek Philippe Grand Complications, but we can often give you better value on a trade, so upgrade to a new flame or just trade out a watch you're not wearing for one you will. To buy, trade, or sell, reach out to me directly. My email address is tmosso at thewatchbox.com. All right, normally I open with our thumbnail watch, but this time I have to break with convention because these watches are insane. 2023 limited editions from H. Moser & C, both in blue-gray tantalum with jade and lapis lazuli dials. Each one is a 10-piece limited edition. These are only just available as new watches, so to be able to find them here is quite exceptional. We were lucky to acquire an example of both. 10 of each. These watches are 42 millimeters, 13.5 millimeters thick, and 48.5 millimeters lug to lug. It is extraordinary to find tantalum cases that have been sculpted to this degree. You never find this level of detail on something like even an Audemars Piguet tantalum royal oak, as these cases are first machined and then hand finished, creating these extravagant scalloped profiles. You can see that the bezel is concave all the way around like a piece of molten metal, flowing at 6 o'clock and 12 o'clock, and then thinning out in the mid case. The case is also differentially finished with satin grain on the narrow profiles and black polish on the hollows of the lugs. The jade here has a marbled profile, not the solid green that you see on, for example, de Bethune and FP Journe jade. This is a more complex composition, of course, with color gradients all the way across. No two pieces will be exactly alike since this is a natural material. But the one that really captures my heart, and I didn't expect this since I like green, but it's this lapis lazuli dial paired with a tantalum case. It is the knockout of the two, with wonderful mineral elements inset. Again, no two exactly alike. This is the Andreas Streller designed perpetual calendar system that Moser has used since 2005. It uses a stub hand, 12 hours, 12 months. That's how it indicates the month. And then you have a bidirectional perpetual calendar that moves in either direction. How often do you see a bidirectional quickset, much less one that's keyed to a perpetual calendar? You could see two huge discs are used to maintain the oversized date. They overlap right there. That's how an oversized date can be used without using an oversized disc and an oversized case. Again, lapis lazuli dial to die for. We also have a hacking or stop seconds function and a power reserve indicator. Power reserve is 7 days advertised, but in reality, it's almost 9. Twin barrels, you can see jewels set in gold and chaton fixed by screws, pocket watch inspired with a 3/4 style set of bridges designed to look like one mono bridge circa the 19th and early 20th century on Moser watches from the time. We have an entire drivetrain set in gold and chaton down to a full platform assortment, which means the escapement, by the way, 14 karat gold, the escapement for lighter lubrication, plus the balance, plus the hairsprings. All of this comes out in one assembly. In goes a newly lubricated and pre-regulated assembly when the watch goes in for service at your regional Moser service affiliate, so it speeds up the return to you, because it doesn't need to be regulated over weeks before it goes back. We have a little jumper on the back for the leap year indicator, as Andreas Streller rightly concluded when he designed this complication, that you didn't need to know the leap year full time, so it didn't need to be on the dial. By the way, if you want to change it, there's a push adjuster on the case flank. And here we have escapement, hairsprings, and balance made entirely by Moser via its precision engineering subsidiary. By the way, look at the case back complexity. The sapphire itself is curved to match the case back. This is why the watch wears so well on smaller wrists despite its size. You could see that we have two horizontally opposed flat hairsprings 180 degrees out of phase, so instantly accomplishing what a tourbillon requires a minute or more to accomplish. In any position, including in a wristwatch application, double opposed flat hairsprings instantly cancel out the effect of gravity, giving you what a tourbillon would give you in a pocket watch without any compromise for a wristwatch application. Let's do two quick wrist shots here. This is my favorite Moser ever made. It was the toxic green dial titanium DLC model. Now it's this. Between the tantalum and the lapis lazuli, I cannot think of a more romantic watch, and with a perpetual calendar and a week plus power reserve, it is even practical. Yep, it fits underneath the cuff. Take a quick look at our marbled jade dial, also spectacular. This one for those who like to be a little bit lighter in color dial. If you prefer silver, if you prefer a champagne dial, this is going to be the one for you. And of course, if you are green with envy, this is going to be your choice. That said, I promised you a green dial in the thumbnail, and now we get to launched in 2022, a U.S. limited edition. This is the Grand Seiko High Beat GMT SPGJ 259, 40 millimeters in diameter. It is stainless steel in the famous 44 GS case that has been iconic of Grand Seiko since 1967. Via a tin plate manual polishing method, the entire case is hand finished. A technique that requires about 3 years to master, giving you what the Swiss would call black polish on every polished facet of this polyhedron case. 2 time zones, one in 12-hour format, one in 24-hour format. Of course, the bamboo green hand is the 24. We have a smooth sweep to the second hand thanks to 36,000 vibrations per hour or 10 beats per second. Automatic winding. It has a 55-hour power reserve, 100 meters of water resistance, a stop seconds function, and it's adjusted in 6 positions to deviate no more than +5 or -3 seconds per 24 hours, better than a COSC chronometer. This is a watch that was limited in availability to the United States, but of course, this being pre-owned, we ship globally. Taking a quick look on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, it wears nicely. Although 14.3 millimeters thick, it wears surprisingly low, and a cuff should not be an encumbrance. I can recommend it for a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference, and it has a satisfying heft with its full steel bracelet. A wonderful watch, generally for him, though on a strap, it would also work for her. My favorite feature, it's actually not the green dial, which is bamboo inspired. It's the dial furniture, the logo, the aperture for the date, the hands, and the hour indices, which are micrometrically faceted, polished, and satinated alternately by artisans who just make these tiny pieces all day long. Now, I've always considered Rolex and Grand Seiko to be co-equally the best dials in the mainstream luxury category. That said, if you buy the Rolex Blueberry of the current generation Submariner, you're getting something that's a cut above. Full white gold with ceramic bezel insert, by the way, the bezel 120 click glide. This is a gorgeous current generation take on a watch that was born in 2008 as the Smurf. That one featured blue. This one features black and blue for a little bit of a difference between the dial and the bezel. Still 300 meters water resistant. You now get a little bit more of a contrast between your bezel and your dial. You can see the watch wears well on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist, and I can recommend it for a wrist as small as 15 centimeters circumference. It's hefty with a solid case back, a meaty case, solid end links, solid center links, and a thick gauge white gold, or I should say gray gold clasp. Now a 3-day power reserve. The real reason you buy a Submariner over another Rolex sports watch, unless you're actually going to use the 300 meters of diving depth, you buy it for this glide lock system. 20 millimeters of adjustment in 2 millimeter increments. It's great for fine sizing where you can pull it all the way out and use it over a diving suit as an extension. Now, I mentioned Rolex dial quality, black lacquered base. You can see the hands as well as the indices are white gold to resist tarnish and oxidation over time. We'll do a quick lume shot so you can see how good this watch looks in the dark. Rolex has its own chromolite blue lume. The bezel pearl is actually sapphire capped for durability. Go Rolex over engineered. And all 3 hands are lumed so you can see even in the dark and the depths that your dive watch is running. I think every dive watch should have that, but the great advantage over most divers is that this is only 12.3 millimeters thick. Taking a quick look in profile, you can see that gray gold that I mentioned. It's an 18 karat white gold that Rolex uses. Most of the better brands used it. It's white all the way through, and it never needs to be rhodium plated. Now, let's say you want something a little bit more fabulous. Well, in 2018, Rolex launched 2 extravagant 116659 models with sapphire and diamonds. Now, this is the older 40 millimeter case in caliber 3135, but it's also something that no non-gem set Rolex can claim to be. It is handcrafted. Rolex gem setting is all done manually, although on a conventional Rolex watch, the only manual process is placing the movement in the case. On a gem set Rolex watch, especially a gem-paved Rolex watch, all of these gems are attached using mechanical tools and heat, the way it would have been done in the 19th century. We have perfectly optically graded diamonds and sapphires. That's the only part of this that's automated, the grading. So there's no color or clarity gradient from gem to gem. And you can see the first 15 minutes of the bezel, it is still unidirectional and functional. First 15 minutes are a lighter set of sapphires, and then they're dark blue the rest of the way around. We have diamond paved crown guards, diamond paved lugs. We have baguette gems in an invisible setting within the bezel. You can also see that each gem has been faceted on all four sides. And then we have a solid white gold dial that has been brilliant snow set. So gems of different size, brilliant cut set to give the look of fallen snow. You can also see we have faceted sapphires for the hour indices. They are set within white gold indices. The watch is illumined, though not extensively, and 300 meters water resistant. Note, this is one of the few Rolex dials that does not have a tome printed on it. Rolex Submariner. Good to know. That's all I need to know. I don't need to know that it's an officially certified superlative chronometer or that it is an Oyster perpetual date. This too has glide lock, allowing me to adjust in and out in 10 steps, 20 millimeters total. It has the same quality of Oyster clasp. Again, a different look than the Blueberry, but you're getting the same white gold construction in a slightly smaller 40 millimeter case with the older movement, but then the handcrafted panache of a full gem set Rolex Submariner. There were two of these that came out in 2018. One had a blue sapphire set dial, one had the diamond set dial. If diamonds are your best friend, this is going to be the choice by default. Now, I love me some independence, and few do a better job of flying the flag for the independent genre than MB&F. And in 2014, Max Busser and his friends launched this, the Legacy Machine 101. It's the most wearable Legacy machine at 40 millimeters in diameter. Now this one right here, you can see, is made of white gold, and at 40 millimeters in diameter, I can wear it quite easily on my 16 centimeter circumference wrist. Although it is thick, make no mistake, most of that thickness is actually a domed sapphire, so believe it or not, sleeves will slide under this. It's short from end to end, and you can see that it wears well on a 16 centimeter circumference wrist, suitable for a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference. It is a 40 millimeter case. It has a lovely striated, a sort of spiral striated, textured anthracite dial. The sub-registers for that power reserve, by the way, 45 hours manual wind, and then the hours and minutes, these are both white lacquered. We have an enormous artisanally black polished balance bridge. We have a dial side bridge for visible escapement, an enormous extended balance staff. You can see the roller table sitting at the bottom. We have a 14 millimeter diameter free sprung balance, beaten away at a visually pleasing 18,000 vibrations per hour. And then we have an overcoil hairspring, so in any position it will keep consistent time because an overcoil centers its mass. You can see that the finishing is outstanding. Even on the bridge for the escapement, we have setination on the top and beveling on the sides. Turn it all over and you can see that one of Max's friends for this edition was Kari Voutilainen, who was responsible for, among other things, the architectural form and relative positioning of the bridges, plus the degree of finish, which is Baroque. You could see that the anglage is both the traditional mirrored hand-applied style and quite broad, plus we have a sharp interior angle over the center wheel, as well as over the second wheel in the train. We have a soleil finish, or a sunburst, on the crown wheel and the ratchet wheel, satination on the click, all screws black polished with chamfered slots in circumference. The wheels have been internally beveled, which is incredibly difficult to do and rarely done on watches that don't bear names like Ferdinand Berthoud and Grubel Forsey, so love to see those hand-finished, internally beveled wheels. We have golden chaton simulating the way pocket watch would have been made back in the 19th century, and that is the controlling idea behind the Legacy Machine series. What if Max and his friends had been making wristwatches in the Jules Verne era? Well, you'd get something that was steampunk, something that was antiquarian, and yet somehow retro-futuristic, and you definitely get that here. Again, beautifully executed, mile-wide Côte de Genève, beautifully gradiated, gorgeous anglage, engine turning on the base plate, every screw black polished with a chamfered slot in circumference, and we have this wonderful pocket watch style rounded case with satinated and polished lugs that are stepped out. A gorgeous piece and a wonderful way to get into MB&F. Not all of their watches are wearable. This one is. That said, if you want purely classical, Laurent Ferrier of Geneva is ready for you. Now, Laurent Ferrier makes traditionally about 200 watches a year. That's including its new sports watch lines. This is one of the watches that made the brand famous. 40 millimeters in white gold. This is the Gallet Micro Order with a lovely black lacquered dial with a radially arrayed Arabic numerals. And you can see there is a lot of symmetry here to the way the numerals are used. The same font or typeface is used for the sunken subseconds as well as the radially arrayed primaries. We have white varnished hands, assegai or spear shaped for the hours and minutes. We have a sunken sub with a concentric pattern inboard, a vintage inspired rounded onion style unbranded crown, a beautiful smoothed pebble shape, and that is the controlling idea behind the galet. We have wonderful integrated lugs with a little teardrop curl on the bottom. On the reverse side, this is where Laurent Ferrier punches above its weight. Laurent Ferrier and his son Christian decided that their priority was going to be finishing, and that is exactly where they lead. The movement itself, FBN, was designed by Ferrier, Barbacini, and Navas, the last two being the founders of a company called La Fabrique du Temps, which was sold to Louis Vuitton and remains an LVMH company. It is haute horlogerie, and it designed and manufactures the basic parts for this movement. The finishing, the assembly, and the regulation is done in-house by Laurent Ferrier. That's where they have put their marbles. It is an extravagant movement with a micro rotor that includes a ratcheting system with a jeweled staff for utmost smoothness. It is also silent, one barrel, 72-hour power reserve, double direct impulse, natural style escapement with twin nickel phosphorus wheels formed by Liga, and then we have an overcoil hairspring on a free sprung balance adjusted in 6 positions. All of these refinements giving you extraordinary precision, improved power reserve, and via the natural escapement design, which has no Swiss lever, the wheels impulse the balance directly, we have a link to Abraham Louis Breguet, who invented the natural escapement back in 1802. Bevels are even broader than the MB&F. We have black polish across the half bridge for the balance, as well as the jeweled staff for the rotor. All screw heads are black polished. You can see this little rocker that disengages the automatic winding system when you manually wind. It too is black polished. The Côte de Genève are even deeper and have a darker color gradient than you'd find on the MBNF, which is extraordinary because the MBNF is exemplary. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 interior angles where bevels meet. Incredibly difficult to create that sharp cleft crease between them. Most companies where you will find two bevels colliding, they'll just use a general rounded profile which can be achieved with machinery. These sharp inward angles always have to be fan finished, and then you'll find 1, 2 different sizes of engine turning on the base plate, and this is as good as it gets. Technically sophisticated, aesthetically beautiful, rare, and unusual, as the double direct impulse escapement is used by precious few companies today. Ulysse Nardin, Carrie Voudelainen, F.P. Journe, Laurent Ferrier. That is some elite company. And the watch wears beautifully, being only 40 millimeters in diameter and relatively short across the wrist. It's an ideal companion for him or for her, and wonderfully classical. That said, we have a true classic here. Dating back to the late 90s, early 2000s, this is a early E-series, Audemars Piguet 25820. It is an SP, which means it's a combination of stainless steel and platinum. Everything you see here that's high polish is platinum. Everything you see here that's satinated is steel. And it is a Royal Oak perpetual calendar. The original Royal Oak perpetual calendar was one of the first Royal Oak complications, and it debuted in 1983 for the 1984 model year. It uses the same base movement as the Jumbo, albeit here with a display case back, so you can see all of that, and I will let you see it. We have a wonderful JLC 920 Bausch here doing business as the Audemars Piguet 2120. So I believe this is described as a 2120, and I think it's a 2808 perpetual calendar module. You can see a Royal Oak inspired rounded octagon profile with the 6-sided screws. That is the rotor, but that's actually the mast because the rotor is beryllium and it goes all the way around. The JLC 920 was designed in 1967 as a commission to AP, Patek, and Vacheron, only ever used by those 3 brands. In the modern era, it's made in-house by AP. JLC never sold it to another customer or used it in one of its own watches. So this beryllium ring runs all the way around. It sits on 4 ruby bearings that allow the rotor and the mast to be very close to the bridges and the plates without any danger of crashing into them under shock. So the base movement's only 2.4 millimeters thick, automatic winding, 40-hour power reserve, free-sprung gyromax style balance, and adjusted in 5 positions. It is highly refined. The best features here being the sunburst on the ratchet wheel, as well as the crown wheel core, the mile-wide bevels. By the way, AP doesn't do rounded bevels like that on Royal Oaks, even the Jumbos anymore. So this is a bygone era of fine finish. We have the tapisserie dial that is cut on a pantograph lathe, and a perpetual calendar system, so you need not create new corrections during irregular length months or leap years. You can see the bezel all in high polish. When you see a polished AP bezel like that, it almost always means platinum. And you can see that there's a slight tonal contrast between the white gold bolts themselves and the ultra blistering white platinum. White gold looks white until you put it next to platinum. This is a 39mm Royal Oak and an ultra thin with that base caliber, meaning it wears the way the Jumbo has traditionally worn. This is one of the great series of Audemars Piguet complications, the Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar. Julio Papi, who is actually part of Audemars Piguet, Reynaud et Papi, and one of the founders, Julio Papi actually wears a Royal Oak Perpetual Calendar from the early years. I think this is a 5554, this is a 25820, so this is a later and more elaborate version, but with the same beating heart and iconic design. It has outstanding pedigree. That said, I have another AP that's going to make an appearance later in the show, but we're not quite ready for it. Let's stick with something that's mainstream from AP, which is the Royal Oak. And this is the Royal Oak midsize. It's the 15450. It debuted in 2012, and it replaced both the 39mm 15300, I should say, and the prior 14790 midsize, which was a 46. So this is a 47. It's 9.8 millimeters thick, and it's actually just over 49 millimeters end length to end length. So though it's a 47, I encourage you to think of it as a 39 or a 40. That's definitely how it looks on the wrist. You can see on my wrist, 16 centimeters circumference. It doesn't look any smaller than the 39mm you just saw. It's 50 meters water resistant, but critically it's got a screw down crown, so unlike the 50-meter push down crown of the Jumbo, this can actually be worn in the water. It's pretty well loomed, and I'm going to show you that to advantage here. Plenty of luminescence. You get fine finish to a degree that is distinctive of these Royal Oaks. Bezel, case, bracelet. The bracelet by itself, forget the case, forget bezel. The bracelet by itself is 9 to 11 hours of hand finishing, because some of these features, like the polished ends of the intermediate plots, are so subtle you can only really appreciate them as you roll the bracelet through the light. Now on the reverse side you have AP's manufacturer 3120 caliber, which was designed with the offshore in mind, so it's tougher than it needs to be for a standard automatic. It has stop seconds, quick set, 60-hour power reserve, and a free-sprung Gyromax style balance on a full bridge. Again, toughness and finery in equal measure. Oh, by the way, the rotor, the coats of arms of the Audemars and Piguet families remind you the AP is, since 1875, the oldest Swiss watch brand that is continuously family-owned and run, never sold away from the founding families. So this is a great AP for those who have a smaller wrist, who don't want to step up to the offshore-like 41mm and want something a little bit more durable on the wrist than a Jumbo. The 37 is a great option. Now, let's say you have a huge wrist. Well, I have a solution for you. Launched in 2010 and 49.2 millimeters in stainless steel. This is the Omega Seamaster Aqua Terra Small Second XXL, and it is everything that name implies, though surprisingly only 12.5 millimeters thick. It's quite svelte, so it's broad across the wrist. It's just not particularly thick. I would recommend this for retired athletes, especially if you played basketball or football. You've got that big wrist, you know, you can't fit into Italian sports cars, and every watch looks too small on you. The solution is here. I wouldn't wear this watch with a wrist smaller than 18 centimeters circumference. You can see it is not thick, though it spans my wrist like a suspension bridge. Now, it's a fine piece, being 150 meters water-resistant stainless steel and quite well loomed. There are other variants of the 49.2 millimeter case. This is by far the sportiest of them. We have this anthracite-colored dial, and you can see it's got the teak deck concept striations, applique indices that are, by the way, alternately finished satin and polish. This gives Grand Seiko a run for its money here, but my favorite part is the movement. On the reverse side here, we have what started life as a Unitas 6498 in the 1950s. The movement was originally designed for pocket watches and desk clocks. Well, it becomes the 6498/2, which is then upgraded dramatically in aesthetics and refinement to become Omega's 2211. So the movement is 36.6 millimeters in diameter, so it fits hand in glove into this oversized case. It is a pocket watch style architecture, so we have a traditional center wheel, third wheel, fourth wheel, escape wheel, and a balance that beats away at 21,600 vibrations per hour, with the balance being almost the radius of the 36.6 millimeter movement, so it looks very much like a pocket watch. Solarization on the crown wheel and ratchet wheel. We have a lovely deep grained spiral satin finish that runs across the anthracite colored bridges. There's engine turning on the base plate, but also on the bridge below the balance for the escapement. We have a 53-hour power reserve, a chronometer certification, and it's adjusted in 5 positions. A very cool watch with the highest grade alligator leather strap. This is the answer for the guy who can't get a big enough watch but doesn't want to wear some goofy Hublot or Royal Oak Offshore 48. This watch has size, but it also has integrity. Okay. Now let's say you do want to wear some sort of goofy Royal Oak Offshore, but you want only the best. Well, I have to say that this watch is both goofy and glorious in equal measure. Circa 2008, this is the Audemars Piguet Royal Oak Concept Carbon, a chronograph and tourbillon. And no, this is not an offshore. This is a Royal Oak Concept. 44 millimeters in diameter. It's sapphire. It has a ceramic bezel, a forged carbon case, and a titanium case back. So it's very light in spite of its size. It is about 57 millimeters lug to lug, so you're going to need a big wrist for this one, but you will be rewarded for your immense anatomy, as this watch includes a chronograph with both column wheel and lateral clutch, very traditional. It has a multifunction crown, which I will demonstrate thusly. Now it's in neutral, now it is in winding mode, now it is in setting mode. Multifunction crown, just like the APRP built Richard Mille models, and by the way, this is built by APRP, that's the reason for it. We have a power reserve indicator up at the top of the dials, manual wind twin barrel, 237 hours of power reserve, just fractionally short of 10 days. We do have a tourbillon regulator. It's a 1-minute tourbillon, free sprung with an overcoil and adjusted in 5 positions. Turn it all over. You can see that the movement includes bridges and plates in titanium and forged carbon, which is damn cool. You can also see that the column wheel mechanism is visible. This is the 2895 caliber, and we're going to take a look at it on my wrist. By the way, because it is a sports watch, 100 meters water resistant and fairly well loomed, I'll screw the crown down, and we will throw this watch on my wrist, and you'll see it's just too big for me. It's a lovely piece, though. A wonderful dream for a small man, but thoroughly viable if you've got that big 18 centimeter circumference or larger wrist. This watch gives the Greubel Forsey's of the world a run for its money. In fact, I would take this over Greubel Forsey's current sports watches, which, unless featuring GMT or tourbillon, feel like an attempt by Greubel to raise volumes by cutting price. This, however, is not a compromise AP. This is a no-compromise AP. This is the Royal Oak and APRP at their best. You just need a big wrist to get away with it, but it is very light. You can see even the strap is specific to the model with an angularity to its molding that melds nicely with the forms inset between the two ends of the bezel. A lovely watch. So let's say you like watches for big wrists. Well, you don't have to have a huge wrist to wear this watch. 43 millimeters in diameter and stainless steel. This is a circa 2011 model from Montblanc. Well, in 2008, Montblanc announced its first ever in-house caliber and the Nicolas Rieussec collection of complicated chronographs to act as the vessel for that movement. Now, Montblanc had only been a watchmaker since 1997, so this was a show of what Montblanc could do at its then still new Leloc manufacture. So we have a combination of a mono-pusher chronograph, a design on the dial that echoes the chronograph boxes made by Nicolas Rieussec, who was a pioneer in chronograph design. We actually have a second time zone, and you can cover up that second time zone when you don't need it. So you can hide it underneath the local hour hand. They're both in a 12-hour format. With the day-night indicator over at 9 o'clock, you know whether that reference time is, for example, 8 p.m. or 8 a.m., and you can see as blue gradually overtakes, we're looking at 9 p.m. right there. There is some loom. The central hands are loomed. We have a date visible at 3 o'clock, and you can see that date can be driven both forward and backwards as you travel. My favorite part of the dial side is actually the set of rotating discs, one for chronograph seconds, one for chronograph minutes, and the dramatically black polished bridge that bears them. The black polished bridge has also been hand beveled on its side, so this is a really nicely finished part. You can also see it uses both polished and blued screws, which is a nice refinement. Now, most Montblanc Leloc watches use Salida, ETA, or Valfleurier movements. The MBR 200 is a movement made in Leloc, but exclusive to Montblanc. It's got a lot to love. Twin barrels, automatic winding, 72-hour power reserve. We have a column wheel for function selection and a vertical clutch for chronograph engagement. It's a 4 hertz movement that's built like a sports watch movement with ceramic rotor bearings for high efficiency and a full balance bridge with a free-sprung balance architecture for toughness against shock. We also have a little kerf underneath the crown so you can more easily dig your nail in, which I love. After 2018, the Riosec became a 44.8 millimeter watch, so these 43s are actually a better solution if your wrist is my size. You can wear this one quite easily. It's about 50.9 millimeters lug to lug and just under 15 millimeters thick. So if your wrist is my size, you can definitely wear this, though the bigger the better. It is an elegant piece. It is a dress watch, though it has sporty overtones with a bit of lume and stainless steel. I consider this to be an all-arounder. Also an all-arounder is this 2022 Beijing Winter Olympic Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter. Now the case is steel, the size is 42 millimeters, the dial is blue ceramic, and then the insert on the 120 click bezel is a laser ablated titanium. It has a nice, satisfying, gritty action. You could see that the details of the dial include indices in the colors of the Olympic logo and laser-formed waves in the ceramic dial base. There's no shortage of luminescence. The bezel pearl and the minute hand are differentially lumed, so you can easily read them relative to each other in the dark. We have a coaxial chronometer caliber inside, 8800 is what we have here. Beijing logo on the back. Actually, the solid caseback version is a bit thinner than the display caseback version. You get the same tech. Anti-magnetic, shock-resistant, chronometer certified. It's a master chronometer. So not tested as a bare movement. It's tested as a full watch. They test water resistance, shock resistance, anti-magnetic resilience, power reserve, winding efficiency, and yes, chronometry. All of those things, and you get 2 different types of dive extension. One is a fold-out. The other is 9.6 millimeters of incremental slider adjustment. So you have the ability to fine-tune as well as pull it all the way out over a diving suit. You even have intermediate-sized links for additional fine-tuning. This is the latest version of a long-running so-called James Bond design. The Seamaster Diver 300 meters soared to fame in 1995 on the wrist of Pierce Brosnan and appeared in 4 Bond films on his wrist, becoming the definitive James Bond Omega, even if Daniel Craig, the brooding James Bond, later primarily wore Planet Oceans. I'll always love the Brosnan Bonds, and I'll always love the Diver 300 meter. But some people like exotics and independence, and I will never fault you if your heart turns towards 2 of the 1990 pioneers of the type. In the 1990s, Roger Dubuis was one of the very first to strike out independent of large group ownership. With his partner Carlos Diaz in 1995, he created a company called Sogem that later became Roger Dubuis formally, and the Homage and the Sympathy lines were their initial offerings. The Sympathy is by far the more distinctive, a case with the look of molten metal drawn out and then flash frozen. It combines creases and curves, satin and polish, and strong welded lug profiles. This is actually very similar to the watch that Dubuis himself wore in his final years, the biretrograde perpetual calendar, which is both Geneva seal and Besançon chronometer certified. It uses a Longines L990 dual barrel automatic base, finished to Geneva hallmark standards, adjusted in 5 positions, and you can see beautifully executed with all of the tricks: black polish, anglage, satination, Côte de Genève. Quite fine in every regard, a true high horology movement taken to the state of the art. Some of these were even regulated by Dubuis himself for timing at the French Observatory in Besançon. 37 millimeters in diameter in white gold. This is an exceptional piece. Jean-Marc Wiederrecht and Dubuis created a retrograde perpetual calendar system for Harry Winston in their initial high luxury watch back in 1989, and this perpetual calendar module is a direct descendant of that one. This watch has a feature not universal to Dubuis watches from the period: a full Roger Dubuis folding clasp in matching white gold. Throw it on my wrist, and you can see that Dubuis 37 is a good match, though it does wear large for its size. You gotta really think of it as a 40 millimeter, but it is quite thin. Graceful, collectible, and arguably the Roger Dubuis reference to own. The biretrograde perpetual calendar in the original symmetrical dial, symmetrical crystal, symmetrical bezel Sympathy case is the one to buy if you're gonna buy Dubuis. 2 years later, in 1997, Felix Baumgartner and Martin Fry, respectively watchmaker and designer, founded Erverk with Baumgartner's brother Thomas, and Fry designed Baumgartner created the mechanics, and they built their name on a unique satellite hours system that used a reliable Maltese cross mechanism, improving on the previous spring and star wheel system created by AP in 1991. The Erverk system was far more robust, sports-oriented, and reliable, but it was the same fundamental idea of wandering hours. So a satellite system that rotates as its carousel rotates. By the way, we have a PEK cover, aluminum wheels, and then the chassis, the carousel below, is made of R-cap. It's read by starting at the right side, and the hour is read digitally. So the hour right now is 12:30. Now the hour is 12:45, and as the hour exits stage left, the new hour, 1 o'clock, enters stage right. Now it's 53 millimeters lug to lug, side to side, this case in black steel and gray titanium. It's 39.5 millimeters. It's 15 millimeters thick, and you can see on the reverse side, something rarely featured on watches. There are pneumatic turbines, and by restricting the air that flows through the turbine, Erverk allows you to slow or even stop the winding of the Zenith Elite automatic base. So full means you're an inactive person like me, so you need all the winding efficiency you can find to keep your watch topped up, 48-hour power reserve, by the way. You might be semi-active, and you maybe want to restrict the wear and tear on the automatic system. Or let's say you're concussive and violent with your watch, where you want to freeze the automatic system altogether to protect the winding system, but also the rotor bearing, and it lets you do that. So a 100-piece limited edition. This is the Erverk UR105TA from the 2015 model year. Okay, I saved the best for last. As much as I love Erverk, I am fundamentally in love with AP. I have a love-hate relationship with AP. I love AP for watches like this. This is a watch launched in 2009, the Jules Audemars Chronomètre with AP escapement. 46 millimeters in red gold. This watch features a single direct impulse chronometer style detent based on the Robin escapement of 1791. So very much like what you'll find on a marine chronometer, but in this application braced against shock, stoppage, and jumping. It's also beating away at 43,200 vibrations per hour, or 6 hertz. Now it features 2 hairsprings that are horizontally opposed, much like the Mosers we saw earlier. That cancels out the effect of gravity in every position, and this is a platform escapement, exactly as you would find on a vintage marine chronometer. We have a power reserve indicator for the 90-hour manual wind power reserve, and 2 separate mainspring barrels, which you can visibly wind from the dial side. We have black lacquered sub-registers, and on the reverse side, you can see this is AP at its best. Hollow concave black polished ratchet wheels, a pocket watch style double ratchet for the winding system. We have several different bridges and a finger style train down from the center wheel to the bottom of the escapement, and you can see the interior of each bridge has been extravagantly interior beveled, the best of the best, with no expense spared. This watch originally cost far over $200,000 when it retailed new. Impressively, for a high horology watch, it also has a stop seconds feature, which surprisingly is not universal in this class of timepiece. Also impressive, this watch is designed to run no worse than plus 1/3 of a second per day, and by chronometer they do mean chronometer certified. It is not just nomenclature. This thing walks the walk and talks the talk, and against your ear, the super high frequency single direct impulse chronometer style escapement sounds exactly like the valve gear of a Ducati, which is to say music to a watch connoisseur's ears, and probably the best choice for you if you are a Ducati fan. If you love the watches you've seen today, and by the way, I love this one, reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.